In 1610, a Spanish woman named Maria de Zozoya confessed to murdering 840 people. The confession was written down, signed, and accepted as absolute truth by the court that would decide her fate. But here's what keeps historians awake at night. She couldn't have killed a single one of them. The children she claimed to have poisoned simply didn't exist. The gatherings she described attending were physical impossibilities, and yet she confessed to every detail, every impossible crime, every violation of the laws of nature itself. What could force a human being to confess to acts they never committed, to crimes that never happened, to horrors that existed only in the fevered imagination of her interrogators? The answer lies in a device so precisely engineered for agony that it turned the human body into its own instrument of destruction. They called it the Judas Cradle, named after history's most infamous betrayer, because this machine made everyone betray someone, their friends, their neighbors, themselves. And by the time you understand how it worked, you'll never think about justice the same way again. Picture a stone chamber in the depths of an Inquisition fortress. The air is thick with moisture and the metallic temps of old blood. In the center of the room sits a wooden stool, unremarkable except for what rises from its surface, a pyramid of wood or metal, 4 to 6 inches tall, its tip sharpened but deliberately, carefully blunt. Above it, a system of ropes and pulleys hangs from the ceiling. This is not a torture device born from the mind of a sadistic dungeon keeper working alone in the dark. This is the product of bureaucratic efficiency. The Spanish Inquisition, established in 1478 by Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella, operated like a government agency. They had offices in every major city. They kept meticulous records. They standardized their procedures across territories. And they had a very specific problem that needed solving. Burning heretics at the stake was effective for executions, certainly, but it was too quick. Victims died within minutes, sometimes faster if the smoke claimed them first. There was no time to extract confessions, no opportunity to make them reveal the names of other heretics hiding in the community, no chance to create an example that would linger in the public consciousness long enough to instill true fear. So the Inquisition's engineers, and yes, they actually employed engineers for this purpose, set about creating something more efficient. They needed a device that would keep the victim alive for days, not minutes. Something that would inflict escalating suffering without leaving the kind of visible wounds that might horrify even a desensitized public. Something that would operate automatically using the victim's own weight against them, requiring minimal intervention from guards. The solution they designed was a masterpiece of mathematical precision and calculated cruelty. The genius of the Judas Cradle lay in its geometry. That pyramid point wasn't needle sharp, because a sharp point would pierce through tissue too quickly, causing fatal injuries within hours. Instead, historical manuals from the Inquisition specify an angle designed to create constant, concentrated pressure without immediate penetration. The victim, stripped of clothing to maximize humiliation and vulnerability, would be suspended above the point using ropes attached to their wrists. Then came the slow, controlled descent. Guards would lower the accused inch by agonizing inch until the pyramid's tip made contact with the most sensitive parts of the human body, the anus, the genitals, sometimes the tailbone. But then something happens that the engineers had calculated with perfect precision. They teach us who we were and who we must never become again. Because next week, I'm revealing an execution method so brutal it was used exactly once and then banned forever. The reason why will chill you to your core. This is history that refuses to be forgotten, and you don't want to miss what's coming. The mathematical precision of the Judas cradle created a timeline of suffering that physicians documented in disturbing detail. During the first 6 to 12 hours, victims experienced what doctors called the shock phase. The body floods with stress hormones. Heart rate spikes to dangerous levels. Many victims described a strange dissociation, as if they were watching their own torture from outside their bodies. The pain was so overwhelming that the brain almost couldn't process it as happening to them. But as the hours stretched into the first full day, as muscle fatigue became insurmountable, something far worse began. The victim's full weight now rested on that pyramid point. The pressure, concentrated on such a small area, began causing significant tissue damage. But remember, the blunt angle meant it was crushing and tearing, not puncturing cleanly through. Blood flow to the area was compromised but not stopped. Nerve endings were compressed and destroyed, creating a type of pain that physicians described as all-consuming, not sharp, not stabbing. A crushing, burning, endless sensation that had no peak because it never stopped intensifying. And through it all, the victim remained conscious, aware, trapped in their own body as it slowly destroyed itself. Everything. Not just because the pain broke them, though it certainly contributed, but because their minds could no longer distinguish reality from interrogation-induced fantasy. Physicians who witnessed these sessions documented a predictable three-stage progression. First came resistance and denial. Victims maintained their innocence, begged for mercy, prayed loudly to God for deliverance. Then came bargaining and partial confession. Victims admitted to minor heresies, tried desperately to give their interrogators something, anything, to make it stop. And finally came complete psychological collapse. In this final stage, victims confessed to whatever was suggested to them, including acts that violated the laws of physics and basic logic. Which brings us back to Maria de Zozoya, the midwife from Logroco, whose confession was so absurd, so impossibly detailed, that it accidentally exposed the fatal flaw in the entire torture system. Maria was 52 years old when a neighbor accused her of witchcraft, claiming Maria's evil eye had cursed her crops. Standard procedure followed. Arrest, interrogation, and when no confession came, escalation to the cradle. They placed her on the device on a Tuesday morning in 1610. By Wednesday afternoon, roughly 30 hours later, Maria began talking, and she didn't stop for 6 hours. but Salazar wrote a report, a methodical, devastating dismantling of torture as an investigative tool. It creates whatever truth the interrogator wants to hear. The Supreme Council, shockingly, agreed. Maria's impossible confession, born from delirium and agony, had exposed what reformers had been arguing for decades. News of the trial spread rapidly across Europe. Newspapers in Germany, France, and England published articles expressing outrage. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Within weeks, the judges who sentenced Anna were formally censured, but more importantly, her case became a rallying cry. Other German states followed. France banned judicial torture in 1789. The dominoes were finally falling. Are they powerful educational tools that make history real in a way textbooks cannot? Or do they risk becoming morbid spectacles that desensitize us to human suffering? When you stand in front of the actual Judas cradle, when you see the real ropes and the real pyramid, does it teach us to be better? Or does it just remind us how easily we could slip backward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation matters. These aren't just artifacts from a distant past. They're warnings about what happens when we forget that every human being, no matter what they're accused of, no matter how certain we are of their guilt, deserves dignity. The moment we forget that, we're one small step away from rebuilding the pyramid.